In this video, we're going to continue working with our DHCP to make it a little bit more customized to what we might need for our environment. Instead of just randomly handing out DHCP addresses like we did in the prior activity, in this video, we're going to create some exclusions or IPs that won't be handed out, as well as some reservations or an IP address that will always be handed out to specific machines. Let's see how we do that. So here I am. I already have my scope set up on DM1, and SA1 is already configured to be getting a DHCP address from that machine. If from the command prompt or from PowerShell, I do an ipconfig/renew, it will renew my DHCP address and get it up to date as of right this moment. At this time, it is now 3:04 p.m. So when I come back into leases and I refresh the page here, I see it is exactly 1 hour from now that it will expire. Great. In DM1, the first thing I want to do is create an exclusion. So I'm going to look into my scope, right click, and in the address pool, I'm going to right click and say new exclusion range. Now, in this case, we created everything from 1 to 100 as a viable IP address, but the scenario may be to where we want to set the first 5 IP addresses aside for something else. So I'm going to set that right here, 10.99.0.1 through 10.99.0.5. So the first 5 IP addresses at this point are now excluded from distribution. And I can confirm this by going back to SA1, and I press up arrow to ipconfig renew. We see here previously it was 10.99.0.1. At this point, when I renew it, I should not get 0.1. Let's try that again. And now I have 10.99.0.6. So previously we had something that was in that exclusion range. We then excluded it, and now we get a different IP address altogether. Again, we can confirm this if we go back to DM1, and we look at our address leases and refresh. We will see SA1 now has the IP address 10.99.0.6. So the exclusion stops certain IP addresses from being handed out. However, perhaps we want SA1 to always have the same address. Maybe we want them to go back to eventually the .1 address. So for that, we can actually create a reservation to keep server SA1 with one specific address, regardless of how many times or where it is when it's been turned on. To create a reservation, ultimately we need, if I scroll over to the right here, this unique ID information right here. And that is essentially the hardware ID of that device. I can do this fairly quickly if I just simply right click the IP address right here and say add to reservation. It says the lease has been converted to a reservation, and at this point, whenever server SA1 turns on, it will always get 10.99.0.6. It's kind of nice. That way, if I have a printer or some other device that I always want to have the same IP address, while still using DHCP for my entire organization, the reservation will keep it all in one place. If at a later point I need to remove that reservation in the DHCP console, I can click under Reservations. I see the reservation right there. I can simply right click and where's delete? There we are. Right click and delete. There we go. I can also manually create a reservation. For that, let's go down to a PowerShell prompt, and I'm going to start by ping server SA1, which we just now know is at 10.99 0.6, and we will get a couple of nice responses back. However, I need the hardware IP. For that, I do arp-a, and I will see right here is the IP address, and this is the hardware address for that device. I've gone ahead and highlighted the physical address, and I'm going to right click, and I should now have that on my clipboard, which I can use in just a moment. Go back to DHCP, and I will right click under reservations and say new reservation. For the reservation name, I can go ahead and give it whichever name I want, such as server SA1. For the IP address, 0.1, yes. And then for the MAC address, I'm going to go ahead and right click and paste, and there is the MAC address that I copied from PowerShell. I'll go ahead and say add, and then close. So even though we still have an exclusion range for 1 through 5, we can create a reservation for one of those addresses. And now when I come back to SA1 and I do a renew, I should now get .1 as my IP address. Every time this computer turns on with that same MAC address, I will continue to get .1 as my IP